This trigger film was developed for health services to use as part of an experience-based co-design process, EBCD. EBCD is a patient-centred quality improvement process. The film is intended to get local people, patients, families and NHS staff talking together about how they can jointly improve people's experience of health services. You can find out more about this process and how to use trigger films by accessing this link to the EBCD toolkit. This film draws from a collection of 37 interviews with adults on the autistic spectrum. The interviews were conducted across the UK by the Health Experiences Research Group at the University of Oxford. It includes people talking about life on the autistic spectrum, about being diagnosed, and about the types of support they have accessed or would like to be offered. The full study can be seen on www.healthtalk.org. We'd like to know more about how you used this or other trigger films in the collection, and we'd be grateful if you would spend a few minutes completing the feedback form. The link to this is on this page.
I think it really sort of all stemmed down to never quite feeling as though one was the same as everyone else. One wasn't really ever part of the group. People were always somehow distant. And I think I sort of have a grasp on it all now, but remember just always sort of feeling as though, I'm not really the same as these people. I don't really get why they do it. It makes no sense to me. And it was always very much, I've heard the analogy before of sort of viewing the world as through sort of a pane of glass. You can see it, you can communicate with it, but you're not really a part of it. I think that sort of is very apt. I once described it to a friend, must be about 8-9 years ago, as basically I describe myself as being emotionally retarded. They just don't make sense to me. I just don't get it. I don't get that sort of emotional bond, emotional connection with people that others seem to. And, it always sort of makes you feel very isolated.
I may have heard some stuff about autism, but I didn't know what it meant until pretty later in my life. I think I may have known what it is when I was in my tweens.
And what does it mean to you now?
It's really hard for me to say, to be honest.
Did you want to try or not?
Maybe some other time.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. It's not actually that long ago. I've been diagnosed as an adult only a few years ago by a local psychiatrist here working in the NHS. Diagnosis being mild Asperger's syndrome. And not a diagnosis that surprised me. I was perhaps surprised that the psychiatrist picked up on it, but a diagnosis really that I'd almost concluded myself beforehand that was a condition that I did suffer from. So not surprised. It's just really an official confirmation of something that I understood in my own mind to be the case already. But it's literally only within the past few years that a diagnosis has actually come. Yes, and speaking to somebody who's had, a fair bit of contact with mental health services over the years, I found myself in the past being apparently on the verge of a false diagnosis of schizophrenia. This is going way back into my later teenage years. So, it's the advance in understanding within the psychiatric profession, of Asperger's syndrome that's, given the correct diagnosis now, where they were really going down a completely separate path and a wrong path in the past.
unbeknown to me, my mother had been told about Asperger's syndrome by a friend of hers because her son had Asperger's, and when she was told about all the symptoms, she was really certain that I did have this. So we decided that we wouldn't be fobbed off anymore and that we'd push for a formal diagnosis. I was given the formal diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome. So me and my mother were really, it was probably the best day of our lives because she had struggled for 35 years with me and she was never given any help or support, you know. She described it as a lonely journey for us sometimes. And well, actually we went out to the pictures the next day to celebrate, you know. So that was what it was like.
So what did you think when you actually received the diagnosis? Can you remember what you thought?
Oh, relief. I thought that is it. When I first went up and said, he asked me the list of diagnostic questions, and it's not like somebody understands, somebody knows what I mean. Yes, I do constantly misread people. For one, I have a long history of misreading people, not knowing quite what people's motives are, unless it's very obvious. If it's absolutely blindingly obvious, I had to go back again the second time to see a clinical psychologist, and he said, yes, he said, you've certainly got Asperger's. So in my opinion, you've got Asperger's syndrome. But at last, somebody bloody understands, you know.
Well, I would say that a diagnosis is largely a positive thing, that it's the way into getting help, and that having a diagnosis of Asperger's, there's a very wide range of people with the diagnosis of Asperger's, so there's a lot of people who are quite high functioning, but a diagnosis is it's an advantage, not a disadvantage in my experience. It's the route into obtaining help and support that previously you may have gone decades without having.
Every case of autism is unique in every little different way, but you know, a lot of them can be categorized in general groups, but you can't throw Asperger's syndrome in with autism because low functioning autism ends up, you know, reducing communicative abilities, brain function is quite, well, it's damaged in some cases. I mean, my little brother suffers from autism, and he doesn't have much of a concentration span, but he's a terrific speller. I mean, absolutely terrific. You know, all these different things. I mean, you got ADD, ADHD, you know, PDD, NOS, all these different things, and they are quite encompassing. I mean, all of it is encompassed under autism, but you can't encompass it all under one code. I mean, you've got to have different treatments for different types of autism. I mean, it just doesn't work trying to treat a high functioning autistic person like a low functioning autistic person, because the communication abilities, the intellectual abilities, the movement abilities of them might be different. The low functioning will be better at some things than the high functioning, and vice versa. You can't put them all under one remedy.
Although I live on my own, I have got pretty much quite a hefty care package. My care plan says I'm not supposed to, apart from to the shop, which is literally around the corner and there's no roads to cross, although I still did manage to get run over going to it once. But no, my care plan says that I shouldn't go out unaccompanied. You're very restricted as to when you can go out and when you can do things, to the, you know, even like thinking, you know, ringing up and making a doctor's appointment, you have to sit and think, okay, well, who can take me that day, who can take me that day? And then that leads to problems like, because the doctor's surgery don't understand when you phone them up that, you know, you can't go on your own. So they go, well, we can't give you an appointment this afternoon, it's got to be this morning, because we don't give out the afternoon appointments till lunchtime. I said, well, lunchtime's too short notice for me to get someone to come with me. And they're like, well, just get a taxi down. And it's like, I could, but is it really, the best thing? So it gets very confusing for everyone.
I just don't know if there's enough people who can diagnose it accurately as it is without putting people into subtypes, and what does that achieve? And I don't know. I think what it would achieve is it would help. It would allow for the signposting to be better. So, you got two people. I could feel two people in the base, absolute opposite difficulties, so people automatically presume, a teacher or, a doctor has, or someone meets someone with Asperger's syndrome or autism once, and there's this constantly this presumption, I think, that if they've met one person, then they know what to do for the next person, and that's not necessary. That's probably, and out of everything that people, doctors and different professionals and who work in the field or work with people with Asperger's syndrome, if there's a constant mistake that's made, it's the assumption that I've met one person, now I know how to deal with the next, and they all constantly have to be aware of the fact that that's not really the case. They have to understand that there's different people, and they have different needs.
So yeah, basically ever since then, which was about 4 years ago, my life's just really changed, because before then I just didn't know what I had, couldn't kind of socialise, couldn't go out, couldn't see anyone, because I couldn't explain why I felt like, how I felt. And it's just kind of ever since then, I haven't actually had any support as such, I haven't really had any counselling, but just being able to read books, being able to contact other people who have got Asperger's, and just generally knowing what I've got has made all the difference for me, because there's just an excuse, a reason why if I feel bad in a situation now, I know how to deal with it better, I know why I feel like that. It's not that I'm just randomly panicking for no reason.
What do you think, what could help you, do you think?
Well, I think they've helped me in part by altering the medication that assisting with my depressions, and that has, by tackling the depression, they've improved the concentration a bit. But I think myself that looking at things like attention deficit disorder in adults, which is it was long thought that it was a childhood problem only, but I understand that there's some psychological work done in Australia where there's been particularly people have come to the understanding that it does persist into adulthood, not with the kind of hyperactive symptoms that you might see in children, but I would think that some of the potential treatments for that, and there are drugs that are given for attention deficit, there are the mild things like Ritalin, things that are the mild stimulants, the mild amphetamines that are used things to treat attention deficit, I would think could very well assist with my mental functioning there. But the psychiatric opinion I've come across locally is to say, is to not know about attention deficit as distinct from hyperactivity, and that they're thinking if you're not displaying symptoms of physical hyperactivity, you can't really be suffering from attention deficit problems. And I think they're mistaken on that, but that's the opinion they've come to. And it's very hard to know where to go if your own psychiatrist is disagreeing with it. I'm not saying that's the end of the road, but it's hard to know as an individual patient to know where to go for further assistance, really.
Do you take antidepressants?
No.
And is this a sort of ongoing thing, or is it just
It's been ongoing since about year 10, kind of like first mini breakdown / meltdown. Problem is I'm just not very good at dealing with emotions of any kind. I'm good at dealing with happiness. Yes, we're all good at dealing with happiness. It's just any other emotion I'm not that good at dealing with.
Have you found sort of strategies of dealing with this?
No. we don't really have any strategy of any kind. Probably because we keep on being messed about by mental health services. They're here, they're there, they're everywhere, they're nowhere. So finding a decent mental health service that will actually stay with you is like trying to find a Scarlet Pimpernel.
Yeah, we might. If you want to move out and leave your parents, is there some sort of support that could help you live independently?
To my knowledge, not anymore. Because the general consensus amongst government health agencies is that autism doesn't matter when you turn 18. Once you turn 18, the support stops. Dead. If you're a child with autism, that's fine. 15, 16, 17, you're okay. Your parents can get you support. Once you turn 18, you are considered adult enough to go out and do it on your own. You're not considered adult enough to be given support so that you can do it pretty much independently, except for the support. They just stop the support and tell you to do it yourself. And that, as you can probably tell in the tone of my voice, is very annoying. It's very, very annoying.
Would you like somebody to live with you, or would you like somebody to come in and?
Well, not live with me, no. But come in from time to time, and just ask questions, because that's, if you've got answers from questions that you wanted to ask, that's what you need.
And did this, as well as the diagnosis, did he give you support, or she give you support for your attention problem?
No, absolutely not. No, that's the confounding thing, that I'd gone there with this one thing in mind, thinking, because that was, to me, what was creating the biggest problem, not only in employment, but I'd also tried to return to education. I tried to complete an access course and found that very difficult because of my concentration problems, access to higher education, that is. Obviously, the NHS are working within the constraints of their resources. They can only offer you so much time, and they got perhaps some people who are more serious than others. But if they review your case on a periodic basis, there's only so much can be fitted into that interview, and things to do with my concentration were always getting pushed down the agenda and getting squeezed out. So no, the original problem that I'd gone there with, ironically, didn't get addressed at all, no.
As I say, I had this sort of support worker, but I can't say whether she was any good at or not, because we never really did anything. We just sat there and talked, and and she was paid about £15 an hour just for talking, and then we talked mostly about other things, so I can't really say that she was any good, because we didn't do anything, and I'd lost my confidence. But she ended up having to leave, and then I saw the man again, and we were discussing me having another support work, and he said, well, you're, and this other support worker came to see me to introduce me to her, and she said that, and he said that they would see me in about 4 weeks. Well, I'm very literal, and if somebody says 4 weeks, I think they mean 4 weeks, and I waited and waited, and nothing happened, and I rang up after, and I said, I thought they were going to be starting in 4 weeks, and the chap said, well, it's going to be 8 weeks. I said, well, really, you should say, if it. I thought you meant 4 weeks. I said you should have told me, and he said, well, I didn't know how literal you were. Well, it was a bit of a strange thing to say. Well, I thought, well, how literal could anybody be? You either are literal, or anyway, I just got distressed, and I didn't feel that they were accommodating me or listening to me.
I was absolutely really annoyed about how I was treated at the job centre. They had no clue whatsoever about autism or people with autism, how it affects us and stuff like that. I just felt like I was just there for a show really, and all they were was just all talk, blah 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 this, blah 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 that. And I am on the incapacity benefits and got basically job seeker allowance and all that stuff. And to be honest, I just don't want to be involved with the job centre really. In fact, the worst thing about it was they actually wanted me to go to a doctor so he could then prove that I had autism. Yeah, I know, tell me about it. That was fun. And the doctor...
Why did they want you to do that?
Because they needed proof. They needed medical proof. And I'm sorry, but I'd be diagnosed at school for all that time and they had no evidence. And I had to go through all that, you know. I had to go and talk to this doctor who had no clue himself, you know, because, no offence, but doctors, they don't tend to specialise in, you know, conditions like autism. I mean, some do, some don't, but most of the time they're more into, like, you know, medication, you know, diagnosis, you know, problems they can see, you know, if you're sick or something like that. Not a mental condition, you know, that's something else. And there's me having this full conversation with this doctor, literally teaching him about autism. I mean, and then he goes, oh yeah, you're autistic, and then fills in this medical form. There you go, evidence, show to the people, yeah, blah blah blah, everything all went through. But it should never be that hard, you know. No, because it's hard enough for us as it is to get, you know, get support and that. But to go through the whole process of going to, you know, to a job centre full of people, you know, that's hard for us. Then going to tell them that we have this problem, telling them. You know, that made, you know, I was lucky enough that I was sort of able to tell them about my problem, but for most other people, you know, with our social system, we're not going to do it. We just won't go. It's just be all too much for us. But yeah, I'm really, really annoyed with it, and I think that's something that they really need to improve on, really, because it's horrible. It should be easier for people, you know, with autism, you know, to get a job or to say, you know, or claim benefits.
They said that if anything happens to my mum, you know, they would step in and help me, you know, because, you know, and now that I've got the diagnosis, there's hopefully, if I did have to live here, but I'm going to try and fight tooth and nail to stay here, because they'll say it's too big, I can't manage it, but at least hopefully I'd probably be put in a house and not a flat because of my condition. You know, okay, it may take some fighting, but, you know, but at least maybe I could be put in a house and perhaps maybe, you know, in a decent area, because, you know, I think without that diagnosis, you know, I would have been lost, because housing organisations or anything, you know, councils, whatever, won't take anything on face value. So at least I've got the diagnosis and it will secure me. I think that's why I really need it in case anything happened to my mum, because at least I've got, you know, at least I've got some kind of you know, a weapon to fight with. As without it, I don't think I would have done, because they'd have turned around and said, well, if you haven't got the diagnosis, then as far as we're concerned, you know, you may or may not have the condition, so, you know, we can't, you know, you're not really a priority. So without it, I would be lost. So I'm really glad that I have got the diagnosis, because it is some form of help.
And you can look at a person and you wouldn't be able to tell. You know, you look at a standard adult Asperger's sufferer, and 9 out of 10 times, if not more than that, you wouldn't be able to tell what's wrong with them, because it's hidden. I mean, you can tell you can tell if a child's autistic or not by the simple fact that they're rolling around the shop floor screaming their lungs out. You know, I want this, I want that, I want the other. But it becomes more hidden as you get into adulthood.
The best people to understand it are the people that actually have the problem. Even they may not know it, but, you know, they can tell you, you know, how, as long as you keep things very simplistic and, you know,